Hello, everybody. It's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and I'm the co-founder of DLA Night. With me today, I've got Danielle Guzman, and Danielle is from Mercer, and she is the global head of social media. I was told I had to say that before I came on. So Danielle and I are going to have a great chat. I've been looking forward to. We've actually had this arranged since about January. And all kinds of things have got in the way. And we're going to talk about 5 things to kickstart your employee advocacy program. And I've been allowed and permission to basically grill Danielle on the facts and figures that she gets from her program. So we're going to talk about the 5 things, but we are going to really drill down into the detail of it. Before we get started, where can people get hold of you?
Absolutely, Tim. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn, first and foremost, Danielle Guzman, and on Twitter at GuzmanD. And then you'll also find me on Instagram for those of you who are over there at GuzmanDMG.
Right. Okay. And there's some people that may not, English may not be their first language. So Danielle is Danielle, and Guzman is Guzman. So Danielle, and you get asked this all the time because it's become like the opening question, which is, you were called the accidental expert in social media. So what's that?
Oh, wow. That's a great question to kick off, Tim. Accidental expert. Well, to be frank, if we think about the way we look at our careers today, I always reference them as career experiences. So essentially about 5-6 years ago, I started taking a step back on my journey, which is predominantly marketing and product development, and decided where are the gaps and where's the world headed? And one of the biggest areas was social media. And it was something that I was engaged in, but not immersed in. And I realized that was a huge opportunity. And since then, I've never looked back.
And you're now, I mean, you're one of the most active people that I know. Maybe it's probably just the algorithm that serves up your content, but you're very active in terms of not just sharing stuff, but being best practice in the way that in the way that you share things. So you're a great person. For example, if someone was new to social media, I would recommend that they came and looked at your stuff, because this is what good looks like. Yes.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, to be frank, I believe in learning the craft inside and out from the ground up. And I also believe in going beyond theory into practice. So it's one thing to post content on social media. I believe it's not a broadcast channel. It's an engagement channel. We're supposed to have that social component in social media. So I'm there to build community, to cultivate relationships, to engage, to actually read what people are sharing and then comment on it and have a conversation around it. And I really encourage other colleagues to do that as well, regardless of why you're there. To me, that's the best way to receive value. If you're just going to go on there and click, 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 I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, other than to check a box to say that you went onto social media that day.
So what does social media mean to you?
To me, it's a way, I mean, right now, it's essentially the lifeline to the world, right? I'm in Brooklyn, New York. We're starting to come out and kind of relax things a little bit in the New York area, but it's still very much a socially distanced community. And social media has and always been, to me, a way to access and network across the globe. I've met more people on social media in the past 5 to 6 years in varying countries than it would ever be possible physically traveling. And I say that coming from a previous role at AIG, where I traveled almost 50% of the time for 10 years. I've still had the opportunity to meet so many more people. And actually, social media also levels the hierarchy in an organization. So it's enabled me and many of our colleagues to meet executives, to meet thought leaders at all different levels that perhaps we wouldn't have been able to get into a room with previously. So it's really an opportunity to build those relationships without boundaries.
I think that's one of the things that probably scares most people, which is that they've worked all their lives to become a senior VP or something within an organization. And now what's happened is that social media has democratized everything. So there is no hierarchy anymore. If I want to go to the CEO of Mercer, I can do that and have a conversation with him.
Why is that a bad thing? I mean, if we think of it,
it's not a bad thing. It is a bad thing if I'm trying to sell them double glazing or something like that, which would be totally inappropriate because it would be the wrong place and the wrong time. But it's not a bad thing. You know, if we've got things that how we can help each other, then that's a great thing.
Absolutely agree. And I would say the same principles that you or I would use in those relationships when we go to a cocktail party and meet someone for the first time, or in a boardroom and meeting someone for the first time, those same principles should uphold on social media. There's no shortcuts. You can't go from step one and say hello to all of a sudden ask a favor of the individual. So you really have to build that relationship. It can be accelerated. And in some ways it does require a bit of more of an investment in time because it's digital, but the results are the same. And that's what of it to me is there's colleagues that I've connected with, thought leaders I've connected with that I may not meet for 3-5 years after the fact. And when we meet, it's like we've known each other this whole time, yet it's the first time we're actually connecting in real life.
Yeah, it's Brian Fanzo that said that social media turned the first meeting from a handshake to a hug. It's very true that I remember when I first met Brian Fanzo, I hugged him. It's amazing that the number of people that the friends that I've met on social media, and I may even never meet them.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that phrase. I'm going to have to hang on to that phrase from Brian. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, Brian's with great things like that. So 5 things that you need to kickstart. We talk to a lot of people who are, is employee advocacy. Why should we be doing it? What's the value? So what are the 5 things that you would basically talk about in terms of if someone was looking at employee advocacy, why would they do it?
Great question. So first I'd start with, well, why are you even looking at it? So what is the goal of this? Is it from a sales perspective? Is it from a talent acquisition perspective? Is it brand awareness? So figure out that goal.
Can I just say, can you explain what those 3 things are?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you mean by, why would you use it for sales? Is it to sell something? Why would you use it for talent?
Yep, absolutely. So if you think about it from the perspective of sales, a couple of things, right? So right now we sort of lost that face-to-face interaction. So you could be using it to attract new business. You could be using it to strengthen client relationships. You could be using it to drive incremental value with relationships you already have. If we're thinking about it from a brand awareness perspective, much like you invest in advertising or other paid media programs in the marketing ecosystem, you can use this as a way to leverage your employees, but to lead with authenticity and trust, which is something that a brand is very difficult to achieve on its own. And you can acquire a lot of earned media through this vehicle. And then if you look at it from a talent acquisition perspective, I mean, there's nothing more valuable to an organization than its people. And people will trust other people. So rather than going out there and just publishing onto job boards or working exclusively with headhunters, why not integrate an element of your employee base who can bring your culture to life, who can bring the experience of working to your organization to life, and then help share those positions that are open. And it helps also minimize the cost of this new talent acquisition, where you may not have to go through the same hurdles that we would have traditionally. I wouldn't say it replaces one or the other entirely, but it does play a very powerful role.
And I think from the talent acquisition point of view, in terms of getting people that are going to contribute and actually stay, so you retain people, you probably don't get that through the traditional job boards and job adverts. You get people that don't get me wrong, there's some great people that are out of work, but quite often, especially in a pre-COVID-19, when you pretty much, in America, you had pretty much full employment, and so did we in the UK. It's trying to attract those people that are the long stayers and actually go, this company keeps coming up on my social feeds. They look like a cool place to work. I might check that out. That question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And not to mention that when you have an employee advocacy program, you have the goals that we were just talking about, 3 potential goals, but you also have, and I know you and I've talked about in the past, the idea of this echo chamber in an organization. Well, that echo chamber, whilst is not the goal of employee advocacy, does serve a purpose. And that's your employees engaging with one another. And that's highly valuable. I would argue even now more so when many of us have turned to remote work, the ability to connect with one another in a really casual, engaging way, to help one another, in a really unfiltered way. And so that's something that we cherish, and that we have this strong employee community across the globe who are talking to one another and who are building momentum off of one another and learning and inspiring and encouraging one another. And then on top of that, we have the more kind of numerical, data-driven goals around how we want to drive value for the organization. So both of them play an important part. As someone who's looking to potentially join your organization, seeing that community helps them truly experience what they otherwise can't experience until they join.
One of my colleagues wrote just recently about it's an article that I think that you read, which was that somebody joined an organization and they were a young person and they only stayed 3 months. They said it wasn't for them, and the leader actually said it was a pity because I never met them. And in a COVID-19 environment where there may be employees that we never meet, and one of the challenges that we have of leaders is that it's this new thing of network leadership, which is we won't be having team meetings where it's face to face, and then we go out for a beer. We will be on Zoom, and it's very different. And I think that's important as we go on, and from a leadership perspective, we do need to think about network leadership and use employee advocacy as basically one of the platforms to allow us to talk and communicate.
Absolutely. By the way, that was a phenomenal article. I mean, I recommend that article to everyone because it's also something that you need time to build on. One of the things about employee advocacy is it's a marathon. It's not a race. You can't turn it on and expect significant results in 30 days, but you can build and start seeing incremental gains month over month. And then in 12 to 18 months, you should really start seeing the momentum there. As you know, right, you can't build a relationship on social overnight. So this is the same thing at scale, except you also have to interject, engaging your employees, helping them train them, giving them the tools to actually be able to thrive. So all that does take time, but it's something that then keeps building return. And I believe as we go forward, this is only going to become a bigger part of the strategy for organizations. It's not going to diminish. Digital is going away. I think it's only going to continue to build momentum.
Yeah, and by the way, I need to thank Peter Springett for that article because I didn't write it; he wrote it, and it was, it was a beautiful piece of content, 300 words, and you read it and you went, oh yes, the world has changed, doesn't it? So, anything else in terms of goals would you talk about? That you've got the 3 new business, talent, brand. Anything else in terms of goals?
Well, beyond that, you can get into, I guess that would be the corporate level goals. Then you can get into kind of colleague goals, which I value very highly, which is we want to elevate our colleagues. We want to help them and equip them to have professional voices. I read a really great stat recently that came out of a Harvard Business Review article that talked about, from a sales perspective, one's professional brand, the way they present themselves on LinkedIn and other channels, is 81% of the decisioning when an individual looks you up before they walk into the room with you, whether that room is virtual or a face-to-face, or before they engage with you. So we want to make sure that our colleagues are putting their best foot forward. And one of the things we do is we invest in them deeply. And before you actually show up on any of our Mercer brand channels, we make sure that we've partnered with you and helped you to put your best foot forward, because it's an opportunity for you to be able to kind of shine, and we want to be able to give back to our colleagues. So I think we need KPIs, and we do have goals around how we can elevate our people and invest in them. And I think that's critical, because at the end of the day, employee advocacy is really not about the brand. It's about the people. And it's about helping them be their best selves. And then that's when it kind of gives back to the brand. Too often, I feel the goals are only brand centric, and then will become a vehicle. And how do you build that trust and that relationship with our teams if we're actually not thinking of it through the right lens? And I think that's kind of a hard, different point, right? Because when you think of a lot of the things an organization does, it's for the organization first. This is for our people first. And through the program, we provide them with tools, with training, with connections to thought leaders, influencers, and other really relevant voices that would help them externally and create those opportunities for them to extend their relationships. And from there, they're able to build professionally and also be able to obviously give back to the brand that they serve. I always say, when you work for an organization, you rent your personal brand to an organization. We want to make sure that we service that, we respect that, and then we enable them to be their very best selves.
Yeah, I know someone that uses the word eminence, especially they work for a management consultancy, and eminence in the outside world is so important for them. They need to be, we now call it a personal brand, but they would see it as being recognized by people in the industry as a go-to person to use the talk that we probably used 10 years ago rather than personal brand. So that's gold. So what would be the second thing that you need to sort about?
Yeah. So secondly, I would say you need to kind of define your audience. If you have 300,000 colleagues in your organization, are you legitimately wanting to activate 300,000 people? I think it's really important to think about where. It could be a geography split. It could be from a line of business. It could be from perhaps the people that are already on social media, and looking at that. I mean, if you think about it today, the majority of your colleagues are already using social media in a personal capacity. So you already have this accessible to you at your fingertips. You've simply probably not asked them if they'd like to participate in an employee advocacy program, or you've not set up a program and let them know about it. Often colleagues just don't know about it. So I think it's super important to define your audience and be really thoughtful about why you're reaching out to these particular people, because that's then going to set up the next key point, which is you need some sort of training program. I mean, we talk about continuous learning nowadays. I think I read a piece on content on continuous learning every day. We have to provide continuous learning because social media is changing every single day. And there's new features and functionalities coming out on platforms and algorithms, and we're learning more about them. So we need to be able to make sure that we build a program that we can offer our colleagues and serve it in a way that they want to receive it, whether it's on mobile, whether it's through Zoom, whether it's recorded, but really make it available to them. So I think those two pieces are kind of the next two critical elements: who you're going to go after to really build, and then how you're going to actually do that. And then that needs to be kind of a multifaceted program. You can't just have a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah, so when you talk about audience, you're not talking about who you're selling to. I'm guessing that's kind of the marketing department and their personas. This is about the audience internally who's going to use it.
Absolutely. I absolutely. I don't feel employee advocacy is for colleagues who want to participate. So I don't really connect as well with the idea of take these 100 people and turn them into employee advocates. The first thing I do is, well, ask those 100 people, do you want to build a presence on social media? Are you interested? Because you have to want to do it. This is not a check the box exercise. And the authenticity is such a critical input to one's success. So we work with colleagues and ask them, do you want to? And then not only do you want to, what are your personal goals? Are you looking to just have a presence? You want to make sure sort of like the lights are on and you want to participate? Or are you looking to truly become a key opinion leader? And perhaps you're in a sales position and you focus on a certain part of an industry and you really want to build up your presence and thought leadership in that space. So we really get to understand what their end goal is, and then we map the training curriculum based on that.
Yeah, I think that's important because, I've worked for an organization where they implemented an employee advocacy, and we just got an email saying you must connect your social profiles to this system. So I thought I'd do it because as a good corporate citizen, and then I immediately lost followers. So I immediately disconnected the system, but there was no question about why. I mean, my view is, when you kick these things off, you need to actually seek volunteers. If you say we're looking for people that want to do it, would be the right thing. So training, what sort of training would you recommend?
No, I think it's a great question. So first, I'm a big fan of understanding where people are now. So one size fits all training is fine if you're just kind of trying to get the ball rolling. But I really like to take the time, and we want to look at each individual and see where they are. I mean, if someone doesn't even have a complete LinkedIn profile, let's not dive into engagement strategy, because the value of their investment isn't going to materialize because they don't have the foundation in place. So we really start with foundation setting, but not check the box, have you done this? Help them understand why it's important. There's a reason why on LinkedIn you want to have a photo. There's a reason why on LinkedIn you want to have that banner. There's a reason you want to have a headline. This isn't just because we think it's a good thing. It's actually going to help you when people come to your profile. They have a 1/10 of a second to make an opinion on you before they decide to leave and or follow you or consider connecting with you. So if you have no photo, there's nothing about you, it's written in the third person, there's no way to really connect with you as an individual, I'm going to have a unique point of view on whether or not I'm going to follow you. And it might be the wrong perspective because you are truly a highly valued person that influences a lot of individuals, but we're not seeing that. So we want to help them understand why it's relevant. And I think this deeply resonates, particularly in the sales field. Because if you're out there and maybe you're using Sales Navigator, or perhaps you're working with clients in a now virtual space, you have people coming to visit your profile to see what you're sharing, to see who you are and learn more about you before you connect with them. So you want to make sure that you really create that opportunity. And then also, one of the most difficult things I can say from experience on LinkedIn is to connect with new people. I'm a fan of the cold call connect, so I like to personalize my connections. And why not give people a way to open the door, to be able to start that conversation? So we work really first and foremost fundamentally with helping colleagues establish themselves. You've probably been there, right? You click on the person's profile and it's half empty, or it looks like they cut and paste it from their resume. It sets the tone. So we want to set the right tone, and we want to equip our colleagues to do that. So that's the real foundation. And then from there, it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to invest in relationship building, then we can go into kind of how do you build engagement? How do you build relationships? How do you cultivate them? If you want to learn how to leverage, the power of LinkedIn in this case to really find out who's looking at my profile, what are my notifications? Why should I engage with them? We kind of go into that. Then we go into the art of actually writing content and writing messages. Because whilst the algorithms are quite mysterious in many ways, we do know that there is a quality assessment to anything you post to understand, how it's been structured, the use of hashtag correctly or incorrectly, the whole idea of tagging people. Tagging can serve a purpose when done properly, but it can also go the wrong way. So we want to help them really understand all those, and we break those down into modules. Because as you're sitting here with me, right, these are really big topics I've just put out. And so we split them up. Maybe we do them a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks apart to give the colleague the opportunity to go back, to take action. This is experiential training. This isn't just watch me and move on. Take those actions. We'll see how you've progressed. And then we go into the next chapter. And what I love about it, though, is once you get in and you truly want to be in the space and you see the impact month over month, they'll come back for more faster than we're actually.
We see that as well, yeah. And sometimes they jump to the, you start writing content. We said, we haven't taught you how to write content yet. And
I think when you take that forward, and I take a look at that to say, like, how can we tell this is actually delivering impact for any colleagues that use social media and actually look at and measure the impact of social media? We look at the brand and our channels and their performance, and then we look at our employee advocacy program and the performance. And we're able to actually see and track on a month-to-month basis the attributable revenue that comes from both channels. And in some countries, we see 3-4 times the attributable revenue through employee advocacy. And when you look at the brand channels, it makes sense, right? If a country has 1,000 followers on their brand channels, you can have quite an exponential number of followers of their employee advocacy community who have trust, who are speaking more authentically. And we actually see that. And that's a really important point then when we work with our colleagues to be able to say, this is the value that's coming through our employee advocates. Look at the numbers. It's a multiplier effect of what's coming off of your brand channel. So you have to keep investing in the brand channel. That's the core content that enables our advocates to build off of. But it's important that we really nurture our advocates and we really help our employees be the best they can be, because that's the true value generation.
And so let me go through that again. You're seeing 3 to 4 times more revenue attributed to the employees than you see to the brand.
Absolutely. And it's not consistent, though. So we look at this country by country, and it is not consistent. And there's a lot of variables, right? It depends on who the advocates are, perhaps the maturity they have gone through in social media, the size of the ecosystem. So there's a lot of different factors. But what's important is to look at each of them and then figure out how can we help build that momentum. But I think that's a really important point. And then the other thing we also look at is things like a download, right? Many organizations will put a piece of content out and it's gated. And so you have to give your name in order to get access to the content. So we definitely take a look at, where's the majority of the downloads coming from? And the advocacy community always outperforms the brand. And whilst I don't recommend you gate everything, I do understand why some pieces are absolutely gated from a lead generation perspective. But then we need to be thoughtful about when and how we do that. And that's where our employees can really help drive a tremendous amount of momentum there.
So one of the things that we talked about before we came on air was the echo chamber. And the fact that there's a lot of organizations that do employee advocacy, but they don't teach people how to use social. So the people won't have a good personal brand. They won't have a good network. And therefore, most people's network is ex-colleagues and recruitment consultants. So in effect, what they'll be doing is sharing that brand or sharing the content into the network. And in effect, you're talking to yourself. Do you agree?
You know, it's a great question. So not entirely. I think what we have to think about is, first of all, it doesn't matter how many followers you have. You have 100 followers, you have 10,000 followers. Those people chose to follow you. Let's exclude the bots and the other nonsense. But for the most part, we're going to go with the assumption that those people chose to follow you. And I am a strong believer that everyone influences someone.
Yep.
And then that someone has their own community. So really, if your community is 100, you really should be thinking about your community and the entire community of those 100 people that follow you as a part of your entire potential community that you're reaching. And then when it comes to kind of, you mentioned the echo chamber, I think one of the things, first of all, it is true that if all you're doing is using a platform, which by the way, you were mentioning the 5 things, I would add a platform is one of those.
Yeah, we haven't got that to yet.
We'll get back to that. But if all you're doing is clicking the button and pushing out content, and every other colleague is doing the exact same thing, and then you happen to have your entire community of followers, let's say it's 50% your colleagues only, your feed is gonna look pretty grim. It's gonna look like the same content shared by every single person. But that's not how the outside world sees things. No one wakes up in the morning and decides to scroll someone's feed. Perhaps if you're a thought leader or someone who really shares a diverse breadth of content, but the majority of us tend to go to our homepage and then we see what's been curated for us. So in this case, you know, we always recommend, first of all, add your own authentic voice to what you're sharing, but then also don't look at it through the lens of just the echo chamber, because our goal through training is to help you break through. And like I mentioned earlier, I do think the echo chamber serves a purpose for employee engagement, and we want to have that conversation. But most importantly, we want to help you break outside of that. And we do, as we go through our training curriculum. And I think you and I have talked in the past about kind of how we tier our employee advocates. Some of our employee advocates, we start then connecting externally and helping them build those relationships externally. And I think, and then they bring their colleagues with them, and you start kind of seeing that kind of mushroom explode.
Cool. Okay. So platform.
Platform key. I mean, I think you can't scale a program otherwise, but beyond scale, it enables you to protect the brand. I think it's super critical depending on what industry you're in. A lot of content is compliance regulated. Part of our content is absolutely compliance regulated. It's critical that you're able to serve colleagues content that is brand approved, compliance regulated, and then let them know what content they can make their own, which content they can then create more authenticity around, enable them to share their voices. Platforms are critical because it also enables you to scale globally. You can have content then distributed to colleagues in different languages. It's available at the click of a button, whether it's on mobile, whether it's on an iPad, whether it's on their desktop. It also provides you really rich analytics. We use a platform called Dynamic Signal. There are many other platforms out there. Personally, I am a big fan of Dynamic Signal, just the usability of the platform. And then the analytics are critical because we talked about it earlier, the importance of like where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. We need to be able to actually demonstrate the material impact of this investment. And platforms are critical for that, really rich data dashboards that we can then start looking geography-wise, perhaps line of business-wise. There's so many ways that you can cut this to really get an understanding of what's working and what's not. And then also it feeds back into our training. I'm able to take a look at and see how are colleagues doing? Where are we really thriving? Perhaps we have a group of colleagues that are really getting more engagement than others. And then we have other colleagues that are perhaps sharing too much. Believe it or not, it is a thing to share. Just
it is a thing. Yeah.
And then we can go back to those communities and say, you know, you're doing an amazing job. I love the enthusiasm. Let's package that enthusiasm into a way that's going to help you become more effective. And then on the flip side, for those that are really thriving, how do we elevate? How do we provide them with more tips and tools to really help them and connect them with colleagues that are going to enable them to continue that journey. And I think without a platform, you're kind of blind.
So that's 4. So the 5th one is KPIs.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that to me is the most important. And I want to be able to know, really specific things. Like, for example, when we talked about attributable revenue. So for that, you can also kind of keep digging into the leads generated, the traffic to your website, the downloads of resources. You can see conversions from people, and are they start diving into, are they converting at the same rate when they come through social and a colleague compared to if it's coming through directly through the brand. And that's where you start to cross out now. You kind of leave the social media ecosystem and you have to partner with the really smart people in your organization that do all the marketing tech and the analytics. But when you bring all that together, there's some really powerful KPIs. And I think they're critical to set from the beginning. You want to know what you're going to be measuring and how. And then we do the same with our colleagues. So I was talking more about kind of like from a business perspective, but now from our colleagues, we do the same. We look at things like the clicks, the engagement, the influence, and with the platform, we're able to look and determine how are we going to measure that? How are we going to assign value to the actions these employees are taking to be able to truly understand their impact externally? There was a great report, I know we talked about it a little earlier, from Analytica in April of this year around kind of the global consultancy industry. To me, it was one of the most insightful pieces of content that I've seen that really looks at the social media ecosystem and all of the consultancies and some incredibly talented people across the globe. I think it was across 48 different consultancy firms. And it looks at their ability to drive commercial impact and to deeply connect with the C-suite on social media. And what I found valuable there was a lot of the content that they shared, specific about Mercer, was content that we could see and knew through the use of the platform that we use for employee advocacy and the way that we set up our KPIs. So it was really rewarding to see an external perspective that doesn't have access to our systems, to be seeing the same thing that we're seeing, and to be able to actually know that the recipe that we're using to really equip and enable and empower our colleagues is effective. So I think that the KPIs are critical, because without that, you're investing in people, you've got a platform, you've got goals, you have training, but how do we know it's even working?
Yes, and I think so have the KPIs evolved? Because quite often you start, well, we want to measure downloads or traffic to sites, and then you go, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure there's something I want to particularly measuring in Argentina, because they have a particular geographical and political situation there. Therefore, the KPI there may be different.
Yep, I think it's a great question, and absolutely they have evolved. I would actually say there's been more evolution on the colleague KPIs, primarily because we have clear corporate KPIs in the sense that we want to understand the brand awareness, we want to understand the attributable revenue, we want to understand the web traffic, and we want to build scale on the results of those. So to do that, we actually have dug deeper into the employee communities, and that's why we've tiered our colleagues, recognizing day one, we started with kind of more of a one-size-fits-all. It's all about getting them registered, getting them engaged in a consistent way. And then from there, we evolved into, okay, now that we've got a community that's engaging, how do we differentiate their engagement? Some might be engaging and driving greater impact. Why is that? What are they doing better, different? And then others, why are they not engaging as often? Or they're kind of hot and cold, in and out. So how do we then start establishing KPIs to build consistency? So we really actually go country by country to take a look at where one is, and then align to KPIs that are achievable and will help you move to the next level. So similar to the way I talk about tiers in employee advocacy, we have tiers and then KPIs. It's almost like your starter, and then you kind of add in richness. And again, I think you can't rush it, because these are people we're talking about, right? These aren't. Yeah. So we have to work at an appropriate pace and in an inspiring way. You want people to feel the energy, and you want to tell them how they're doing. I think it's so important to communicate back the incredible value that these colleagues contribute to the organization.
And I mean, one of the things that, quite often people say is that I don't have time for this. So how do you get over that? Is that about providing them with the inspiration?
That's a great question. Well, you may have seen me say it on social media, but there's 86,400 seconds in the day. So we all have time. It's actually about what we prioritize.
Yes.
What you're saying is we're not prioritizing employee advocacy or social media, which is fair. There's a lot of other priorities that are out there. So everyone has to prioritize what's important to them. What I always recommend to colleagues is, first of all, you can update your LinkedIn profile. You can present yourself in the most professional way in less than 30 minutes. If you focus and get it done in 30 minutes, you can go from where you are today to a fully ready profile. So we break it down for them that way in terms of minutes. So in terms of employee advocacy, back to the tiers, if you're a colleague that's just getting started, we kind of have like what we call our 15-minute bundle. So in 15 minutes a week, we kind of break down the activities. So you can go into the platform and you can look and see if there's any content that interests you. We teach you how to create your own words around the content and make it more authentic, and how to schedule content or just to go live and broadcast. Then we show you that's not the only part, right? You also have to go into the channels. You have to build those relationships. So we show you the next 5 minutes, go into LinkedIn or your platform of choice and dive into your notifications, because you want to engage with people that are engaging with you. Yep. And then consume some content that you find interesting and comment and create meaningful moments. So we break it down into 5-minute increments, and in 15 minutes a week, you can do quite a bit. From there, if you're willing to step up, we kind of go to a 30-minute bundle. And again, these are small increments for someone like you or I. You're thinking 30 minutes in a week, wow. My cell phone usage would be so much better if I did that. But still, we have to think about, where colleagues are. So we basically create through this mindset. And then when you get to kind of a key opinion leader, that's someone now that is like truly using the channels as a powerful vehicle to share their voice, to engage with others. So at that point, we're not telling you, you need 2 hours a week or something. At that point, we let go the minutes concept. And it's more about what are the key moments that you want to make sure you're investing in. And I always recommend the first thing you want to do is always start by giving back to your community. It's not about what you want to say. It's about who's engaging with you, engage back, shine the light on others. And then, if there's something that you actually want to include in there personally or professionally, then include that in there. But we really focus on like the kind of the 3-1-1 concept, meaning, 3 things you do should always be for your community, for the people that you serve, for those that you're really trying to bring value to. The next one would be maybe the brand conversation that you're passionate about, that you want to interject and share. And then the last piece is something personal. Perhaps you're an avid volunteer for the British Red Cross, or perhaps you're really a very avid cyclist and you want to share a little bit about your journey, so that you can kind of balance out what you're doing out there. And we really break it down for them. I think that's important. You and I live in this space. Many of our colleagues don't, and to really help them with almost like recipes that they can take, they can print if they want to, and they can look back on and be like, what am I supposed to be doing today? And over time it becomes a habit, and then many of them then get sucked in, right? They start building those relationships, and they want to see what Johnny said to them while they were gone, and they want to go back and see if they got a response, and that's when I think the real magic starts to come to life.
Yeah. We've got salespeople that went from sharing corporate stuff, which got very little engagement, to actually writing their own blogs, and the blogs will get 60, 70, 80 likes, and that's not involving their network, but involving the network's network. And it's when that happens that they see the magic, which is, right, well, everybody who you're connected to who's like that, you can go and basically ask them for a conversation. What, you mean I can ring them up and have a call? Yeah. And everybody that is outside your network, just connect to them. Don't sell to them, just connect to them. Because next time when they come along and they like something and they're connected to you, then you can ask for them for a conversation. And the whole thing, but I've got salespeople that have got so many conversations, they don't know what to do. Which the issue usually is, you've got salespeople who haven't got enough conversations, and that's the transformation that takes place with social. It's an amazing thing, but you know that as well as I do.
Now I have a great question for you, because I love the example you just shared. Before they started writing all these blogs, do you ensure and help them to make sure that they have profiles up to date, so that when they do get all this traffic?
Yes. So as far as we're concerned, the number one thing you need to have is to have a shop window, your personal brand. I don't like the term personal brand because it's kind of sounds like Brian Solis that we can't achieve. And so you're kind of setting someone a goal that is unachievable. So they just go, well, I'm going to do it because I can't achieve it. So it's more about having this shop window. And because what will happen is that someone will come and look at your personal brand, and they'll go, that person is interesting or not. So it kind of all starts. You've mentioned it kind of starts with your summary title.
Yep.
Because the summary title, my summary title closes me business. I've got business off the back of my summary title. So, I've said to, so why did you buy? So, well, you commented on something. I read your summary title. I had to read your profile. You look interesting. We connected, and I suggested we have a call, and it just goes from there. Now we all know that we all know that salespeople basically push people away because we don't like salespeople. Nobody likes sales. We don't like being sold to. But actually, social brings us together and brings us closer. And I'm sure, and I'm turning this back as a question to you. Is that what you're seeing? Is that the customers, prospects, employees, future employees feel closer to Mercia, which is a brand, than using this sort of using social and using this sort of platform?
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. I mean, and if you think of it, again, back to the original, I think, question you asked at the beginning around some of the value I've seen through social. And one of the things I'd mentioned was connecting with people across the globe. We see when you remove the geographical boundaries from that social enables you to do from a colleague perspective, we have massive colleague communities in different countries that have all come together in ways that would be really difficult otherwise. And yes, they're enjoying themselves and having fun and sharing personal elements from their weekends, etc. But there's also a lot of really rich conversation around what they do professionally and a lot of sharing and connecting. And that's when you start seeing the external pieces come into that, because some of our colleagues have a strong external network. And so then they kind of expand that to the colleagues that maybe don't have as strong as an external network and bring them into the conversations. And what we're seeing as well is now that we've got so many more of our client-facing colleagues, obviously, that are investing more in social, they're coming into this. And this is like a rich melting pot of just possibilities. Again, you never know who your next prospect is going to be. And one of the things I always say as well is it may not be the person you're connecting with right now, but he or she behind the scenes may be sharing what they are seeing through you with someone else who will be. So we have to kind of think of that, that dark social, which is, the mysterious behind the scenes, but it's really prevalent. I see it every day. I know some colleagues who really aren't on social. And when I see a piece of content perhaps you've shared or someone else that I really respect shares, I'll be the first to pull it off social and share it through a channel that I know they do use, and kind of, speak highly of the person that it came from. So there's a lot of that that's really starting to build momentum now. And we see that at Mercer. And I think it contributes so much to how our colleagues positively connect, especially now, right? I mean, we know this much of any one person's life, is what I always say. And especially amidst this pandemic, we know even less about what the challenges is they're facing. So any opportunity to give back, to help, to lend a hand, to connect, I think is probably going to be what they remember when we kind of go to a new normal in the future. It's really going to be how you made them feel, how you helped them. And social is such a perfect way to do that.
Yeah, I was talking to a sales leader from Microsoft today. I was actually prepping to do one of these interviews with him. And he says from a sales perspective, the way that they think about things is that there are certain people in accounts that will do what you described, which is, so even though you may be talking to one person, that person will be taking your content and actually sharing it through the organization or sharing it with the people internally that they want to influence. So, in my book, I talk about change makers, and he's used that term as change maker, which is so he sells cloud outsourcing, which will probably be quite large deals. So if somebody is going to sign off on, let's take, $500,000 as a lot of money, and they're going to stand up in front of the board, they're going to make sure that their recommendation is approved, and they're going to make sure that they don't look stupid in front of that board, and they would have read everything that they could have found. And if you're the person that's helped them, And I know sometimes in the sales community, helps is some sort of thing, well, help people. We manipulate, don't we? It's like, no, if you help somebody, they'll actually stand up in the front of the board and say, this person is the person you need to buy from. And this Microsoft sales leader is saying this is what he is using social as a way of spreading their message through accounts, through these individuals.
And actually, if you raise a good point, that the change maker, which I love, one of the things I think is a great takeaway as well as you move into the employee advocacy space is I don't try to change those people, by the way, that are grabbing content off of social and then sharing it through other channels. My perspective is we don't want to try and change their behavior and say, instead of doing that, why not share it on social and maybe mention these other people that you're trying to give it to? Because I think if someone really doesn't want to use the channel, let's respect that and allow them to use it the way they choose to. And rather, that's why I say pick your audience, right? Rather, invest in those colleagues that want to be the ones that are on social and amplifying either the brand voice or their own voices, because that way you're enabling everyone to really be their best in a way that they're comfortable with. So I think that that's critical. And another reason why the example you had shared about the email going out to all colleagues saying you must connect your accounts, I actually think is probably the worst or one of the least desirable ways to actually start this whole thing, because you want to come from a place of, put your hand up if it's something that you enjoy and you would like to really immerse yourself in and become much stronger at. And I think that's where the value, if I think of Mercer, the top 1% of our employee advocates drive more than 90% of all the value. And that's normal. I don't think if you have an organization of, 20,000 people, you should really be expecting the top 1% to really be those key opinion leaders. And then the next 9% are who you nurture. And those are the people that really enjoy being employee advocates, want to learn, want to become that top 1%. And that becomes your entire conversation. After that, I think there becomes a diminishing return in terms of really investing more. Now, if you happen to have an organization that is, they're all striving to be that top 1%, that I would love that unicorn. But I do think it's important to really focus in and not spread yourself too thin.
So I thought I'd quote this to you. This is from Catherine Cole at Telstra Purple, which is one of our clients. They're currently going through a process of transforming the whole of the business to social. And using social right across the business, not just in sales, but in HR and stuff. And she came to us with this, and this is her summary. So she says, a social organization, so it's not a non-profit, but an organization that uses social. She says, a social organization sees social as a platform for closing the distance between clients, prospects, employees, and potential recruits. What do you think to that?
I actually like that. I like that. I mean, you're sort of creating an ecosystem with everyone together in a single conversation that's fully transparent.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we see it in terms of, if you're looking at end-to-end business transformation from using social media as a mechanism to do that, what you've talked about, if you're doing that, you're not social selling is just a random act of social in one department. Using employee advocacy, if you're doing it right across the organization, in HR, if you're empowering those people to talk on social, there will be people that will join the organization off the back of that. The same with, you could find suppliers. I know as a management consultancy, you don't necessarily use a lot of, you're not buying sand and bricks and stuff like that. But, for a manufacturing organization, they may find suppliers that can provide something as a higher quality at a cheaper price, because they're actually out on social and people see that. And that's the social opportunity across the organization.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I think there's just so much potential. And we're on a continued journey. So you never reach the end. There's always new avenues that you can open up. There's new value that you can derive. But again, it really becomes important so that you don't chase squirrels all the time, that you define the goal that you're focused on and the KPIs that you're going to measure against that goal.
So the 5 things are goals. Is it new business? Is it talent? Is it brand? Who's your internal audience? Training, platform, And then the KPIs. So is it downloads, revenue, traffic to sites, or what other KPIs you particularly want?
Yep, and then don't forget those employee advocacy, the employee-facing KPIs, right? How they're performing, so that you can keep building their journey. Especially today, one of the most valuable things an organization can provide for their colleagues is obviously continued learning. So this is one way that we can continuously help them to improve their own professional experience on social media, which is something they can take with them wherever they go.
Yes, you're giving them a life skill, in fact.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, it's interesting. One of the questions I often get is, well, why would we invest so deeply and then they go to a competitor or they go somewhere else?
Yes.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the ways I look at it is when you build a social community and you build those relationships, it doesn't matter if I'm at Mercer or if I'm at IBM, because those relationships come with me, and the investment and the equity that I've built in the authenticity and belief I have around the Mercer brand comes with me. So you don't just turn off the lights to the organization that you were, once a strong advocate for. You continue to advocate through association. So it's actually, you kind of build and you leave behind a part of you as you go forward. So I see it as not black and white. And I think that's an important part, because we have such incredibly talented colleagues that wherever their careers may take them, a part of them remains a part of our ecosystem. And then we start building a new ecosystem or an expansion of an ecosystem with the next organization, which then it benefits everyone. So it's not like doors physically close on social media. And I think that's part of the beauty of it. They're relationships. You don't just terminate them.
Yeah. And there's the old Richard Branson quote, isn't it? Which he was talking to his CFO, and his CFO said, what happens if we train all these people and they leave? And Richard Branson said, well, what happens if we don't train the people and they stay? And it's that, joining companies and leaving companies actually part of business. And now, as a responsible employer, we need to be seen as investing in our employees more so, regardless of what the job market's like, because people won't, if you're not investing in your employees, people won't come and work for you, regardless of how many jobs or lack of jobs there is.
Absolutely. And if you flip that and look at it from a brand's perspective, in a world right now where maybe budgets are tighter, I mean, every organization is sitting on a wealth of experience.
Yeah.
A simple way to exponentially and impactfully increase their reach, the effectiveness of their content, their brand awareness. I mean, all the things we've just talked about, and they're right there, and they work for you. They want to represent you. So we want to enable that.
Yeah. Danielle, we could talk all day about this because we're very passionate about it, but I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience. I've been looking forward to this for the last 6 months or something. That we were originally going to do this back in February, and it's, here we are in June. So thank you for your time. Remind everybody where they can get hold of you.
Absolutely. Danielle Guzman on LinkedIn, @GuzmanD on Twitter. And actually at the bottom of my LinkedIn profile, you'll also find my email address, and always happy to continue the conversation. I think this is such an important topic. I've been thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with you, Tim, and I know we'll continue to have this conversation, and anything that we can do to help, I'm happy to.
Okay. Thank you very much. And appreciate you coming on today, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thanks, Danielle. Bye.